I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. The Congressman-Elect from New York's 3rd Congressional District, the MAGA Republican who ran as, quote, the embodiment of the American dream and claims that he's, quote, a seasoned Wall Street financier and investor. Well, his background seems to be entirely made up. I mean, this is some Frank Abagnale Jr. type stuff here. Like, it all seems to be a complete lie. The New York Times just did an expose. Writers Grace Ashford and Michael Gold just did an article on this. I wish this article would have maybe dropped during the midterm elections, but this George Santos, he's a Brazilian American, but his entire background that he talked about publicly all seems to be false. And when you pull back the layers, it is incredibly disturbing. I mean, first and foremost, he is a fugitive in Brazil. He stole the checkbook of someone that his mother was a caretaker for in Brazil when he was 19 years old. And then he took the checkbook, wrote bad checks to then get sneakers for himself. He confessed to the crime. He fled prosecution from Brazil, came to the United States, and then reinvented this whole fake story about himself. Now, he ran in 2020. When he ran in 2020, he ran against Tom Suozzi, and Tom Suozzi was the Congress member from New York's 3rd Congressional District. Suozzi is a Democrat. Suozzi thought it was wise to challenge now Governor of New York, Kathy Hochul, for re-election, which was a ridiculously horrible move to make. So he abandoned his seat in New York's 3rd Congressional District. Santos was defeated by Suozzi in 2020 by 10 points. Suozzi destroyed Santos, but Santos ran again, and this time Santos won by 8 points and flipped the House seat in Long Island based on this entirely apparently fake background story. So he's not a financier. By the way, let's just talk about his background. Let's break it down. So he claims that in 2010, he went to Baruch College. Baruch College has no records of him ever going to Baruch College. Seems like he just made up the college that he went to. Then he said he worked at Citigroup and Goldman Sachs thereafter. And he claimed at Citigroup he worked as an associate asset manager. Well, Citigroup has no record of Santos ever working for Citigroup. Not even that. There wasn't even a position at that time because Citigroup had sold its asset management division at that time. So there were no associate asset managers then, apparently, according to this New York Times article and according to Citibank, or Citigroup. So he seems to have made up a position there. Also, Goldman Sachs has no record of him ever working for Goldman Sachs. So seems he made up this whole background working for Citigroup and Goldman Sachs. He also seems to have made up this charity. He claims that he led this successful charity that was called Pet United or Friends of Pet Unite, and that it saved over 2,000 dogs and cats in pet rescue operations. Well, there's no evidence from the IRS that this Friends of Pets United was an IRS tax-exempted 501c3. And there's some reference or there's some indication that he did hold a charity event in 2017 for an animal rescue group, but the person who ran that animal rescue group that he threw the charity event for said that they never even received any of the money from Santos. So seems to be an entire grift and made up charity that Santos created here. So as Santos runs in 2020, we do know that he had some job with this company called Linkbridge Investors, and he disclosed that he was making $50,000 a year in the May 2020 disclosures. After working for Linkbridge, he worked at something called Harbor City Capital, which is a Florida investment entity that was sued by the SEC for engaging in a $17 million Ponzi scheme. Now, Santos wasn't named personally in the SEC's lawsuit, but this Ponzi scheme involved making these YouTube videos that would like pump and dump certain stocks. And so that was something he was affiliated with there. We know that he had serious financial troubles in between 2010 and 2020. We know this from eviction filings. In 2015, his landlord in Queens evicted him for not paying $2,250 in unpaid rent. And the landlord said that he was a nice enough person, but clearly had financial problems. In 2017, he was evicted again, where he was living in Queens, another place, this time for not paying $10,000 in rent. And there was a $12,200 civil judgment against him for the unpaid rent and for the other fees and costs associated with those eviction proceedings. But as he ran for office in 2021, he began running on an issue about evictions, but he wasn't on the side of tenants. He was on the side of landlords, and he was claiming that in his 13 different properties that people were not leaving the properties, that he was trying to evict people and they refused to leave, and he was taking the side of landlords and saying that landlords don't have enough rights. Mind you, Santos, who had been himself evicted twice, is now taking the side as being a landlord in 2021. And where is this money coming from that he's claiming he's a landlord and now owns 13 different properties, and saying that these people need to be evicted and tenants need to stop, staying in these spaces, and they need to get out of here and they need to start paying their rent. And he was the one who was evicted twice before that. And so I'll give you one more lie, some ridiculous lie as well. He claims that in connection with his companies, that at least 4 individuals who worked for him were killed at the Pulse nightclub shooting. And there's no record of 4 people working for him who were killed at Pulse nightclub. And that seems to, sick as that is, that seems like it may also be fabricated by Santos. And so here's what happened. Sometime after he lost in 2020, so I've gone through, he didn't really work at Citigroup, according to Citigroup. He likely didn't work there. Goldman Sachs seems to be made up. His college seems to be made up. The charity that he worked for is made up. He did work for this Linkbridge Investments in 2020, earning $50,000. He worked for this entity, Harbor City Capital, that was involved in a Ponzi scheme, and said stopped working there. But then as he's running for election in these midterms, he then is now running an organization called the DeVolder organization. Now, the DeVolder organization he describes as a family firm, but his mom had passed away in 2016. There's no sign that his family had any kind of independent wealth when they moved here from Brazil, but he calls it a family firm. And then the thing that he says that that is involved in is that it's a family-owned real estate portfolio of 13 different properties, and that they engage as liaisons between investment funds and investors. So he says he earns 13 properties, and that the other work that he engages in, he's a liaison between investor funds and investors. However, as part of your disclosures that you have to make, if you are receiving more than $5,000 from a single source, from a single client is paying you more than $5,000, you have to disclose that. And so on his midterm financial disclosures, on his congressional disclosures, he didn't list any clients. So he claims the business that he is servicing clients, yet he didn't disclose any clients that have paid him more than $5,000. So that's the client part of it, which is completely shady and suspect. But then when you get to the 13 properties, there's no indication from property records that he owns any properties, yet alone 13 properties. And so that also seems to be entirely made up as well. Nonetheless, heading into the 2020 midterm elections, Santos writes for the amount of money for his salary that he made from the DeVolder organization. He claims that he was paid $750,000 to $1 million a year from DeVolder organization. So he went from having these fake jobs or claiming to work for places where he apparently didn't work to 2 evictions, 2015 and 2017, and getting a civil judgment against him, and then claiming that he had this $50,000 a year job on his congressional disclosures in 2020, to now at the DeVolder organization, all of a sudden claiming that he's now making $750,000 a year to $1 million a year. And get this, he then takes that money and loaned his campaign $700,000. So he did a loan to his campaign of $700,000 from the $750,000 to $1 million that he was now making. This calls into question a number of things. Number one, is he making false statements on his disclosures? I mean, someone has to be paying him more than $5,000, and he hasn't listed any individual client or any source of money more than $5,000. So that's one thing that is a huge red flag. That could be a violation of the False Statements Act, making these materially false statements to Congress or for official purposes, and that could have a very serious prison sentence if that is proven to be true. You know, and then the other thing that we need to consider as well, in addition to just the False Statements Act angle of this as well, is there other kind of outside foreign money, other influence, other pass-through influence? Is this DeVolder functioning as a straw person entity by special interest to try to get this person elected? Because that's what it looks like to someone who's done cases like this. Now, I don't have any evidence of that. I've laid out the facts that have been presented in the New York Times article and public records. But it seems to be certain people wanted him to be elected to try to flip the House in a certain direction, gave a lot of money to this DeVolder organization to try to do that purpose on the condition that DeVolder would throw it to his campaign, lend it to his campaign. It did lend it to his campaign, $700,000. He was able to win his race, flip an important blue seat to red in Long Island. And, you know, and that's where we are right now. But as I said from the outset, like, this is one of the strangest and shadiest things I've seen, and I've handled cases like this. And so this raises massive red flags to me. I do hope the Department of Justice starts an inquiry immediately, and we can get to the bottom of what's taken place here. I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch Network. Hit the subscribe button right now. We are on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. And in addition to hitting the subscribe button, please check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We have lots of exclusive content you can only get at Patreon, but most importantly, let's grow this independent media platform together. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
Our blue wall stopped the red wave, and election deniers got denied election. That's why we're celebrating with the new Democracy Prevails team. We've got lots of work to do, but we should all be proud that when democracy was tested, democracy prevailed. You've earned this. Don't wait. Get yours right now at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.